That night, his phone lit up beside me. And there it was, "See you tonight." My heart froze. My hands trembled. I stared at the message, feeling my world collapse. But instead of screaming, instead of crying, I smiled. Because in that moment I knew. He thought he was fooling me. But it was me who would fool him. Asterisk. My name is Linda Harris. I'm 51 years old. A wife. A mother. A woman who has lived in the same small Canadian town her whole life. People here know me as the lady who bakes pies for church fairs, who waves at the mailman, who always has her porch light on for neighbors. And for years that was enough for me. My husband Michael and I have been married for 26 years. He's an accountant. Steady. Reliable. The kind of man who folds his shirts neatly and eats his toast with marmalade every morning. Or at least he used to be. Lately something has changed. He doesn't notice when I cut my hair. He forgets to say goodnight. And worst of all, he stays out late. First, I told myself it was work. Tax season maybe. Or maybe he was just tired, stressed, overburdened. But then, I noticed the smiles. He'd sit on the couch, phone glowing in his hand, lips curving into a smile I hadn't seen in years. A smile that wasn't for me. I'd ask, "Who's that?" He'd say, "Just work emails, Linda. You wouldn't understand." And I believed him. Or maybe I wanted to. Because the alternative was too painful. Still, little things piled up. Receipts in his jacket pocket from restaurants we'd never visited together. Cologne on his shirt, one I never bought. And the way he avoided my eyes when I asked simple questions. I wanted to scream. To demand answers. But instead, I chose silence. Because silence I knew was stronger than rage. Silence makes liars nervous. But then came that night. Michael had fallen asleep beside me, breathing deep, one hand still clutching his phone. The room was dark, only the faint hum of the heater filling the air. And suddenly, ping. The screen lit up. I turned my head. And there it was. "See you tonight." My stomach twisted. My pulse hammered in my ears. I reached out slowly, carefully, as if touching a dangerous weapon. I read it again. "See you tonight." The proof I had been waiting for. The proof I had been dreading. He was cheating. The man who had once vowed to love me until death was giving his heart to someone else. But here's the thing. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even wake him up. Instead, I felt something else. Something sharp. Cold. A strength I didn't know I still had. I opened his phone. Opened his GPS. And with trembling hands, I changed his saved location. The address he thought was for his hotel meeting now led somewhere else. Somewhere I would be waiting. That night, while he slept peacefully, dreaming of his lies, I sat in the dark staring at him. And I whispered to myself, "You think you're clever, Michael. But tomorrow, you'll see just how clever your wife can be." Because from that night on, I wasn't just his wife. I became his shadow. His hunter. His reckoning. You know, betrayal never arrives like a thunderstorm. It doesn't crash down suddenly. It drips. Slowly. Quietly. Until one day you look around and realize you're drowning. After that night, after that message, I couldn't look at Michael the same way again. He still kissed me on the cheek in the morning. Still mumbled, "See you later, Lynn," when he left for work. But every gesture felt hollow. Every smile felt rehearsed. I started watching. Closely. I noticed how his shirt smelled of perfume. Not mine, something sweeter, younger. I noticed how his credit card bills showed dinners for two at places I'd never been invited to. And I noticed how, whenever his phone buzzed, he'd tilt the screen away from me, as if guarding treasure. One afternoon, I picked up his jacket from the floor. In the pocket, a receipt. A bouquet of roses. Roses. When was the last time he bought me flowers? I couldn't even remember. That night he came home late. His tie was loose, his eyes glazed. "Rough day at work," he muttered. And I stood there, holding his plate of dinner, staring into his face, wondering if he even remembered what honesty looked like. I wanted to shout, "Who is she? Tell me her name." But I didn't. I bit my tongue. Because anger is easy. But patience is powerful. Instead, I became quiet. Watchful. I made notes. Times he left. Excuses he gave. The lies he told without blinking. And each note was a nail. a nail I would use later to build his coffin of truth. Sometimes late at night I'd lie awake listening to his breathing, and I'd ask myself, when did I stop being enough for him? Was it me? My wrinkles? My gray hair? Or was it just greed? But no matter how much I hurt, one thought gave me strength. If he thinks I'll break quietly, he doesn't know me at all. One Saturday morning he left early. Said he was golfing with a client. But I followed. Slowly. Carefully. He didn't go to the golf course. He drove across town. To a little cafe. And there she was. Young. Pretty. Laughing with him like she owned his heart. She touched his hand across the table and I swear my blood boiled. But I didn't storm inside. I didn't make a scene. No. I stood outside behind the glass watching, burning the image into my memory, because when the time came, I wanted no doubts, no excuses. Later that night when he came home whistling like a boy, I smiled at him. I served his dinner. I asked about his golf game. And he lied. Straight to my face. I remember thinking, Michael, you've already dug your grave. You just don't know it yet. Because the truth is like fire. You can cover it, hide it. But one day, it burns everything in its path. They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from the one you trust most. But sometimes, the real wound isn't just what they do behind your back. It's what they dare to do, right in front of your face. It was a Tuesday evening. Michael came home earlier than usual. His tie was loose, his expression dark, stormy. I thought maybe he'll finally confess. Maybe guilt has eaten him alive. But no. He dropped his briefcase on the table and said, without looking at me, Linda, we need to talk. My chest tightened. About what? He wouldn't meet my eyes. He rubbed his temples, then muttered, This isn't working. The house. The bills. You not working anymore. I think you should start contributing. Rent. Half the expenses. Rent. The word hung in the air like poison. Rent? This was my house. The home I'd built. The home I'd kept alive while he chased his career. I raised our son here. Cooked every meal here. Paid off half the mortgage with my own job before I retired. And now my husband wanted me to pay him rent? I stared at him, my throat dry. You want me to pay to live in my own home? Finally he looked at me. Cold. Yes. Things are tight. You're not earning. It's only fair. But I saw it. That flicker in his eyes. This wasn't about money. This was about her. The woman from the cafe. The one who laughed at his jokes, touched his hand, painted his life in colors I apparently couldn't anymore. He was laying the groundwork. Pushing me out. Making space for her. My blood boiled but my voice stayed calm. You really think I'll write you a check each month to live under my own roof? He shrugged. If you care about this marriage, Linda, you'll do it. I wanted to scream. To throw the glass in my hand across the room. But I didn't. Instead I nodded. Fine. His shoulders relaxed. He thought he'd won. But inside me something snapped. Something silent. Something deadly. That night, when he was snoring beside me, I whispered to the ceiling. You want to humiliate me, Michael? Push me out of my own home? No. I will not leave. I will not break. I will not be erased. I began hiding things. Quietly. Smartly. Receipts. Notes. Screenshots from his phone when he left it charging. Every lie he told I documented. 'Cause one day, I knew I'd need it all. And as I slipped each piece of evidence into my drawer, I realized I wasn't collecting proof of his betrayal. I was collecting weapons. It doesn't always come in the form of shouting. Sometimes it's served cold, casually, in front of strangers. And that's what cut me the deepest. It was a Saturday night. Michael insisted we go to dinner with his colleagues. I didn't want to, but something in me whispered, go. Watch. Listen. We arrived at the restaurant, an upscale place downtown. Candles on every table, violins playing softly in the background. I wore my best navy dress, the one he once said made my eyes sparkle. But when he looked at me that night, there was nothing. We sat with 4 of his colleagues, laughing loudly, glasses clinking with wine. Michael was charming, animated. The man I hadn't seen at home in years. And then it happened. One of the women teased. Michael, you've been glowing lately. What's your secret? He smirked, glanced at me, and then said, well, let's just say I found new reasons to smile. They all laughed. But I knew exactly what that meant. Heat rose in my chest. My hands shook under the table. I wanted to shout, tell them who she is, Michael. Tell them about your cafe dates, your roses, your late-night texts. But I didn't. Instead, I forced a smile, sipped my wine. Silent. The humiliation didn't stop there. Later, when the bill came, one of his colleagues joked, careful, Michael, don't let Linda spend all your money. And Michael, my husband, the man I built a life with, he chuckled and said, oh, believe me, she does. She's practically retired now. I carry the load. The table roared with laughter. I sat frozen, cheeks burning, but my lips curved upward, pretending it was funny. Inside, though? Inside, I was already digging his grave deeper, because humiliation is fuel. And that night, he poured gallons of it into my fire. When we got home, he was tipsy, humming to himself, pleased with his performance. I, on the other hand, slipped quietly into my study. I opened my drawer, pulled out the folder, and slid in another note. Saturday. Dinner. Public humiliation. Witnesses, 4 colleagues. I stared at the folder for a long time, and whispered to myself, keep talking, Michael. Keep laughing. Every word you speak becomes another chain around your neck. I started hiding a voice recorder in my purse during outings. I saved screenshots of his messages to his client. I even printed bank statements that proved the dinners, the gifts, the lies. Every insult, every careless smirk became evidence. Because I had learned something important. Revenge doesn't scream. Revenge watches. Waits. And when the time comes, revenge doesn't miss. And as I closed that folder, I promised myself, the next time he tried to humiliate me, it wouldn't be me left speechless. By then my heart had hardened. The tears that used to blur my eyes were gone. All that remained was focus. Every day Michael grew bolder, coming home later, inventing excuses with less effort, forgetting I was even there. And every day my folder grew thicker. Receipts, screenshots, voice recordings, bank statements, my secret arsenal. But evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed someone who could help me turn it into a weapon, someone who knew the law. So one Tuesday morning while Michael was at work, I took the bus downtown. I walked into a lawyer's office. My palms were sweating, my knees trembling. I had never done anything like this before. The receptionist smiled politely. Do you have an appointment? Yes, I whispered. With Mr. Parker. He was kind, middle-aged, sharp-eyed. The kind of man who had seen too many broken marriages to be shocked by anything anymore. I handed him my folder. My life. He flipped through the pages, frowning, nodding, pausing at the texts and receipts. Finally, he looked up. Linda. This isn't just infidelity. This is financial manipulation. Humiliation. He's pushing you out of your own home. If you want, we can build a very strong case. I swallowed. My voice cracked. I don't want to lose everything, Mr. Parker. I just want justice. He leaned back, eyes narrowing. Then you'll need patience, timing, and courage. Can you do that? I stared at him, at his certainty, and for the first time in months, I felt strong again. Yes, I can. From that day on, I was no longer just a wife. I was a strategist. I learned things. How to track his credit without him knowing. How to store files safely in the cloud. How to position questions so he'd lie and I'd record it. Every time he smirked, every time he belittled me, I smiled inside. Because I knew. One day, I'd put it all in front of him. In front of everyone. And when that day came, his empire of lies would collapse. But there was one thing I didn't expect. My silence. It began to unsettle him. He started watching me. Asking where I was going. Snapping. Why are you always on your phone? He could sense something had shifted. But by then it was too late. The wheels were already turning. The trap was already set. One night, as he slept, I whispered into the darkness. You taught me how to play this game, Michael. But you forgot. I play to win. And as I locked that folder in my drawer, I knew, the next time it opened, it would destroy him. Tell me, if you were in my place, would you go through the legal way like I did? Or would you take matters into your own hands immediately? Silence is a weapon. But weapons, when sharpened too long, begin to gleam. And Michael, he had started to notice the shine. First, he loved my quiet. Gave him freedom. No nagging questions. No confrontations. Just a wife who smiled faintly and let him come and go as he pleased. But men like him, they can never stay comfortable for long. My silence began to feel heavy, suspicious, threatening. One evening he came home earlier than expected. I was at the dining table organizing papers. My folder was locked away, but the sight of me with documents seemed to unsettle him. "What's all this?" he asked sharply. I looked up, calm. "Just bills. Sorting things." He stared at me for a long time, his eyes searching, probing. For the first time in months he looked nervous. "Linda," he said finally, "you've been different lately. What's going on?" I smiled, tilted my head. "Different how?" He didn't answer. He just narrowed his eyes and walked away. That was when I realized he was starting to feel it. The shift. The balance of power slipping inch by inch from him to me. From that day he grew restless. He checked my phone once when he thought I wasn't looking. He asked neighbors if I'd been around during the day. He even followed me once poorly when I went grocery shopping. The irony made me want to laugh. For months I had been the one watching him. Now suddenly he was the paranoid one. One night, over dinner, he put down his fork and asked quietly, almost dangerously, "Linda, do you know something?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I didn't flinch. I just sipped my water, let the silence stretch, and smiled. Because sometimes silence is the loudest answer of all. His hand tightened around the fork. For a moment I saw something in his eyes. Fear. Fear that maybe, just maybe, his perfect little secret life wasn't so secret anymore. And that fear was exactly what I wanted. I began to notice other cracks. He drank more. Snapped at small things. Checked his phone obsessively. As if the world would collapse if he missed a message. And in a way it was collapsing. He just didn't know the exact day the walls would come down. I remember standing at the kitchen sink one evening washing dishes, watching his reflection in the window as he paced behind me, restless. He muttered under his breath, "She knows something, she must." And I dried my hands, turned around and simply said, "Michael, sit down. Eat your dinner. You'll need your strength." The way he froze, the way his face paled. Oh, I will never forget it. Because for the first time in months, he realized the truth. The hunter had become the hunted. There comes a moment when gathering evidence is no longer enough. When you stop collecting and start sharpening. For weeks I had filled my folder with his lies. Bank slips. Messages. Dinner bills. Photos I'd taken from a distance. Even the recording of his cruel joke about me at that restaurant. But now it was time. Time to turn a pile of papers into a blade. I sat at the dining table one morning while Michael was at work, spreading everything across the wood. The proof of his betrayal covered the surface like shattered glass. And I whispered to myself, This is your grave, Michael." I sorted, numbered, labeled, every detail in order. Every receipt tied to a date. Every lie linked to a truth. Hours passed, and when I finished, the folder was heavy in my hands. Heavy with justice. That afternoon I went to see Mr. Parker, my lawyer. He opened the folder, flipped through the neatly arranged evidence, and gave a low whistle. "Linda," he said, "this is airtight. He won't be able to wiggle out of this, not even for a second." I folded my hands in my lap. My voice was steady. "I don't want just a divorce, Mr. Parker. I want him exposed. In front of everyone. I want him to feel what I felt." He studied me. Not with pity but with respect. And then he leaned forward. "Then you'll need the right moment. Somewhere he feels safe. Surrounded by people he trusts. A dinner, perhaps." I swallowed. "And when that moment comes?" His eyes locked on mine. "You end this. No hesitation. No mercy." The words echoed in my head all the way home. End this. That night I slipped the folder under my pillow while Michael slept. It was almost symbolic. Him dreaming of her. Me lying awake with his downfall inches from his head. Sometimes I wanted to shake him awake, shove the folder into his hands and scream, "Here! Look at what you've done. Look at what you've made of us. But no, that would be too easy for him. Too clean. He needed to be stripped bare. Publicly. And so I waited. The next weekend he mentioned having family dinner with our son. I nodded. Smiled. Yes, Michael. Let's do that. He didn't notice how my fingers brushed the folder hidden in the drawer. He didn't see the way my eyes lingered on him, memorizing the man he used to be, and the man he had become. As I knew, this dinner would be his last supper. And as Mr. Parker's words echoed in my mind, next dinner and this, I knew the countdown had begun. Family dinners. They're supposed to be warm, comforting. Laughter, stories, passing dishes around the table. But this one felt like a battlefield. Michael had suggested it. Our son, his wife, us, just a nice meal, Linda. We don't do it enough. He said it with that fake charm of his, the one I'd come to despise. I agreed, smiled sweetly, and slipped the heavy folder into my bag. The restaurant was cozy, candlelit. Our son, David, and his wife arrived first. They were cheerful, innocent, unaware of the storm brewing between their parents. Michael was all smiles, performing again. He ordered wine, told jokes, bragged about his long hours at work. I sat quietly, nodding, letting him bask in his false glow. But I could feel his eyes on me. Every so often, he'd glance across the table, as if trying to read my mind. Because deep down he knew something had shifted. Halfway through dinner, David turned to me. Mom, you've been quiet tonight. Everything okay? I smiled gently. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just taking it all in. Michael chuckled quickly, trying to cover the tension. Your mother's always the quiet one. Don't worry about her. I let the words hang. And then softly I said, No, Michael. Not tonight. The table went silent. David frowned. What do you mean, Mom? I reached into my bag. My fingers brushed the folder. I pulled it out and laid it on the table. Michael's face drained of color. His eyes flickered between the folder and me, panic flashing for just a second. David looked confused. Mom, what's that? I rested my hand on the folder. My voice steady, calm, but filled with a fire they'd never heard before. This is everything. Everything your father has been hiding. Every lie. Every betrayal. Every humiliation he's dragged this family through. Michael hissed under his breath, leaning toward me. Linda, don't. Not here. Not now. I looked at him, straight into his eyes, and said, clear enough for everyone at the table to hear. No, Michael. Not anymore. David reached forward. Mom, what's in there? I exhaled slowly, then whispered the line I had been waiting weeks to say. No, but I do have this. I tapped the folder once, and then let the silence settle like thunder. I didn't open it. Not yet. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted the anticipation to eat him alive. Michael shifted in his seat, gripping his glass too tightly. His hands trembled. His mask was slipping piece by piece. And across the table, our son's innocent eyes were filling with questions. The trap was set. The stage was ready. And all that was left was to pull the trigger. Because sometimes silence at a dinner table is louder than a scream. The folder sat on the table like a bomb. Unopened. Silent. But everyone could feel the weight of it. Michael leaned in, voice low and sharp. Linda, put it away. You're making a fool of yourself. I tilted my head, smiled faintly. No, Michael. Tonight, you'll make a fool of yourself. David looked between us, confusion deepening. Mom. Dad, what's going on? I slid the folder toward him. Why don't you open it, son? Michael's hand shot out, gripping the folder before David could touch it. Don't. This is nonsense. Your mother's losing her mind. The words stung because once upon a time I might have believed him. But not tonight. I reached across, pried the folder from his hands with a strength I didn't know I had. And slowly, deliberately, I opened it. The first paper I laid down was a bank slip. Here, I said softly. $3,000 withdrawn on a night you told me you were working late. David frowned. Michael chuckled nervously. Business expense. You wouldn't understand. I placed the next slip. Another withdrawal. Same week. Same lie. Then I laid down the dinner receipt. 2 entrees. 2 glasses of wine. And a handwritten note at the bottom. See you again soon, love. David's wife gasped. Michael shifted, his face turning red. That's nothing. Could have been a client. I cut him off. Clients don't send messages like this. I pulled out the photos next. Grainy but clear enough, Michael leaning across a restaurant table, smiling at her. Not me. Her. David's voice cracked. Dad, what is this? Michael reached for his son's hand. Don't listen to her. She's twisting everything. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I pressed play on the small recorder I'd tucked inside the folder. Michael's voice filled the air. Cold. Mocking. She's old boring. I only stay because of appearances. My real life. It's with you. The table went still. Every word carved into the silence like a knife. Michael lunged for the recorder, but David shoved him back. Stop. Stop lying. My hands trembled, but I kept my voice steady. Do you see now, David? Do you understand what your father has done to this family? Michael's mask was gone. He looked wild-cornered. Linda, you vindictive. Don't you dare, I snapped. Don't you dare call me names after what you've done. For the first time in years my voice was louder than his. And it silenced him. David's wife stood abruptly, her chair screeching. She couldn't take it. The tension, the betrayal laid bare. She whispered something, too low to catch, and fled the table, her heels clicking against the floor. Michael tried to follow, but David shoved him back again. No, Dad. You sit right here. You answer her. You answer us. I closed the folder, my eyes never leaving Michael's. Because the papers, the receipts, the photos, they weren't just evidence. They were chains. And he was bound by every one of them. And as his world collapsed around him, I wasn't finished yet. Because my final words would cut the deepest. Michael sat frozen. The folder shut, but its shadow lingered. Every lie, every secret laid bare. I looked at him. Not with love. Not even with hate. But with a final hollow emptiness. Do you know what hurts the most, Michael? I asked quietly. His lips parted, but no sound came. It's not that you betrayed me. Not that you found someone else. It's that you thought you could erase me. Like I was nothing. Like our years together meant nothing. David swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on me. Mom. I placed a hand on his. No, son. You need to hear this. He needs to hear this. I turned back to Michael. I built this home. I raised our son. I stood by you when we had nothing. And while I was holding everything together, you were tearing it apart. His face crumpled. A flash of shame? Or just fear? I couldn't tell. The waiter appeared awkwardly, sensing the tension, but David waved him away. This wasn't a night for interruptions. Michael tried one last defense. I made mistakes, Linda. But you. Don't. I cut him off. Don't you dare make excuses. Mistakes are forgetting an anniversary. Mistakes are losing your temper. You planned this. You lived a double life. You looked me in the eyes every day and lied. My voice cracked. And for the first time tears slipped down my cheeks. Not weak tears. Not begging tears. But tears of release. I pulled one last paper from the folder. The divorce papers already drafted. I slid them across the table. Michael stared at them like they were poison. Linda, please don't do this here. I leaned in, my voice barely above a whisper, yet sharp enough to slice through bone. No, Michael. I will do it exactly here. In front of the son who deserves the truth. In the place where you pretended to love me. This is where it ends. David's eyes filled with anger and hurt. Dad, how could you? Michael dropped his gaze, no words left. The man who once controlled every room sat powerless, broken. I gathered the folder, stood slowly, and placed my hand on David's shoulder. We're going home, son. Michael reached out, desperate. Linda, please. I pulled my arm away. No. Home is not a place for lies. And you, Michael, you don't get to call it home anymore. I walked out of that restaurant taller than I'd walked in for years. The night air was cold, but it felt like freedom. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was free. Closing words. Home. It's not built on bricks, money, or even years. It's built on respect. On truth. On love that doesn't fade when temptation whispers. Michael lost his home long before I walked out that door. He lost it the moment he decided my loyalty was disposable. And me? I gained something far greater than revenge. I gained myself back. Tell me honestly, if you were in my shoes, would you have confronted him privately? Or exposed him in front of everyone? Because a house can survive cracks in its walls, but not cracks in its respect. If this story touched you, shocked you, or made you think, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life.